All right, everyone, how are you? Welcome to this week's episode of our podcast. It's called Is Breakfast Included? Thanks for stopping by. On the show this week, I sit down with Todd, Dammit, Kerns, bassist of Slash with Myles Kennedy and the Conspirators. We talked about growing up in Canada. He told some hilarious stories. He talked about his band Toque, which also features Brent Fitz from the Conspirators as well. He told me what he does in his downtime. Man, we talked about so much. It's too much to talk about here, but it was great getting to know Todd and kind of work out the way he thinks and how he keeps busy. He plays with everyone. It was a lot of fun. Let's check it out. Tell everyone who you are.
I am Todd, Dammit, Kerns from Canada. I live in Las Vegas. I play with Slash featuring Myles Kennedy and the Conspirators. I have a band called Toque. I play with Bruce Kulick. I play in Europe with my friends Heroes and Monster. I do a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. You're always busy. You are
I try to be.
Guy. Yeah.
I try to be. There's no retirement plan in rock and roll. You know this.
So you have to. It's feast or famine for us.
Exactly. Yeah.
What part of Canada did you grow up?
I grew up in Saskatchewan and in northern Manitoba, which is the coldest part of the entire process. So I was born in
Vegas?
What's that?
Is that why you chose Vegas to live?
Yeah. Indirectly, I think so, because as soon as I was out of high school, I started making my way west.
Yeah.
So I went into Calgary and then into Vancouver for quite a while, and then I made my way south. So I think I've definitely seen enough winter, although we have, our HQ now is out around the Toronto area in Canada as far as the Canadian HQ. And they get proper winters, not like I remember, like where I grew up. But I've seen the real thing, and I'm not all that psyched about going back. Although every winter in Toque, my other band, we go and do a run across Canada. And it's always in December, and it's always like, damn, dude, did we grow up in this? It's like, it is legit proper cold. Yeah, it's next level. Yeah. But it's one of those, I'm so happy I grew up in small towns. I grew up in towns that were like 1,500 people because of, what I loved about it was it was too small to have like, these are the heavy metal kids. These are the punk rock kids. These are the, muso guys. Although those people did exist, they just kind of existed and they sort of crossed over into all these things where we just kind of liked music, Yeah. So if a guy was into Rush, it'd be like, yeah, okay, cool. What about, this, and so I have a very weird, pedigree of like, knowledge when it comes to everything from Duran Duran to, Motorhead. It's like at all points in between. And I make no apologies for any of it. I just think it's part of a very interesting stew that makes up for what I like about music,
And you really hear that in all the projects you do. You hear it all comes together in everything you do.
I hope so. I think that, I think it would be kind of, like there are some bands that I always kind of go like, they're so good, but they kind of seem to be really drawing upon one thing. Like you could tell you sure can tell they like AC/DC or whatever,
Yeah.
And we all love AC/DC. It's part of the major, the four major food groups of rock and roll. But it's kind of, there's nothing better than plugging your guitar in and just going gang, and feeling that. But what, sometimes I think that's kind of the beauty of all these different things that I do. With Slash, it's very sort of live and anything can happen. And then in Toque, we really play with production and we really get into, a lot of sort of keyboardy type things that I would not normally play with and would probably just largely avoid. But because the other guys are so damn good at it, I'm kind of like game to be like, yeah, let's try it out.
Yeah.
Like we don't have Nick Rhodes there, but we have some sort of, we'll have our own version of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's cool, man. That's cool. What was the gateway band for you that got you into music? Like what was the first thing you heard? And you're like, that's what I want to do.
Well, I always say, I even have the words tattooed under here. I was born in a crossfire hurricane. which for whatever reason, the Rolling Stones' Jumpin' Jack Flash was the first song I can remember hearing as a child. I don't know, it was on a TV show or something like that. And I remember just being this kind of like, this moment of like, I think if aliens landed and they asked me what rock and roll was, I'd probably press play on that song and go, check this out, And, I mean, that said, my parents were, they liked music, but they weren't obsessed. My dad was Johnny Cash, he liked outlaw country and, Chris Christophers and all, the four major food groups of that world, the Waylon and Willie and all that. And then my mother, I found the Beatles' second album. She had that. And I mean, she had a few, but I was like, for whatever reason, that was the one I pulled out. And I remember just being fascinated with the Beatles as a child. It's like a four-headed monster. And at first glance, they all kind of look exactly the same. They're the same haircuts, the same suits. Yeah, you could tell they were different guys, but the magic of that thing, and that really opened up a whole other world. Kiss, bands like Kiss and Cheap Trick came along and they were our bands. You know what I mean? Like as a child, in the 70s, it was kind of like, this is our music now. Like we have our own shit, Yeah. But as a kid, I and I say this kind of that like I didn't find a lot of that to be what I would call inspiring, because the Beatles and Elvis didn't seem like anything anybody could do. It just seemed like, and Kiss for that matter too. Kiss were cartoon characters that could fly and spit blood and breathe fire. Right. And the Beatles were like some four-headed, magical monster. Elvis was a demigod of some sort. I went and saw the movie The Kids Are All Right as a kid, the Who movie. Mm-hmm. And it really opened up, it kicked down a whole door of punk rock for me that was kind of like, I think I can do this. Which is a weird thing to say because The Who is as musical as any of the other acts I was talking about. And, but I think when you're young and you are actually seeing the live translation of all these very, like if you listen to Tommy with the horns and the strings and all the stuff that they did in the recordings, but you're seeing the live application of Pete's loud guitar and then all the aggression with the smashing this and the destroying that. Yeah. It just really had this sort of moment in me that was kind of like, I was already kind of strumming a guitar. My dad had a harmony, F holes, and I would just kind of carry it around like I was pretending to be Elvis or something. And he's like, this is a C chord, that's a G chord, that's a D chord. He just kind of like, laid out a few chords that he knew. And then that really opened up a whole other world. But The Who was that band that I was really like, oh, I want to do that. I want to be loud and jump around and because on record, those songs are not nearly as aggressive as they were live. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I would imagine that for its time, I think some of those songs definitely rocked, but the recordings are a lot more orchestrated than sort of like there's stripped down to those three guys in the back with Roger out front and just loud and aggressive. And I, for whatever reason that, like I said, then all of a sudden, that opened a whole door into the punk rock world where it was all DIY, it was all like, let's get into a garage and make horrible noise together or in people's basements and just like annoy our parents, and then that would grow to be, it was a little less awful and a little, and then sometimes pretty good, and then it becomes something else. But that was sort of, that's a lot of gateway, because all of those things I just mentioned are all little gateway drugs along the way that led to. Yeah.
And I totally get it. What you said, like, the Beatles were this. Honestly, man, I'd be lying. I didn't get into the Beatles till I was 21. And I'm a stubborn guy. It's like everyone loves them, so I'm not going to love them. Right. But what you said about like Kiss being like comic book characters and like you saw the Who on The Kids Are All Right, and you're like, oh yeah, that's doable. So I completely understand that. Just seeing the four guys with their instruments just killing it. But no, I was.
Well, I think it was also the thing of seeing like the Midnight Special and shows like that they would play. And I think just the act of seeing bands playing live changed the game. Because to me, everything was in a two-dimensional. I would listen to the record and stare at the album cover. I mean, that was it was pre MTV, pre any of that kind of stuff. So, but seeing bands play, even if they were lip syncing on Solid Gold or whatever, American Bandstand, it just sort of like opened your eyes to like, okay, so these four guys or five guys or whoever, they just get together and he does that and he does that. and he's up, the lead guitar's up here. You kind of started to kind of piece it together as a child. And it just makes it sort of like, oh, I kind of understand this in the same way, like I was saying before, about looking at a mathematical equation and going like, this all makes sense to me now. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Solid Gold. What a reference there, man. I remember seeing,
I can't tell you what a massive impression that show made on me,
I
because it
know,
was like
right? You know
one
what
of the only shows that was on.
I always hated when Dionne Warwick was the host when it
Yeah,
started, and Marilyn McCoo came in, and I hated
that's
when
right.
they would do their version of the song in the countdown. But I did see Ozzy on Solid Gold.
Really? I don't think I remember
It was
that.
during the Bark the Moon era, and he did "So Tired," uh, the song from Bark
Wow.
at the Moon. He did he lip
Of
synced
course.
it. It was on there. Now
It
I
was a lip sync show. Yeah.
when you go back and look at the video, you're like, I didn't know anything about lip syncing. It was Ozzy and he was singing.
Well, it was always funny to me because the song would fade out. The songs would
Yeah.
fade out and the band would still be kind of. I just watched like the Babies on there recently or something like that. And I was just kind of like, oh, damn, Solid Gold dancers. They had a whole thing. Andy Gibb hosted it for a while. It was
Yeah.
quite a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It was great. It was great. Growing up, having something like
Yeah,
that to me was great. Um,
it really was.
uh, your first band was it Age of Electric? Was that your first real band?
Well, I was in bands prior to that, mostly just kind of cover bands playing around. Because I was like a kid when I always tell this story of how I had an acoustic an Epiphone, and then my father was such a funny guy. He was just like, we should probably get you a bass guitar, and I was like, at the time I'm kind of like, what? Okay, like Paul McCartney plays bass. I'm kind of like in my mind, I'm like, I still don't really fully understand what all this means. But in his mind, it was like you have a guitar, not even an electric guitar, you have an acoustic guitar. We should get you a bass. And I remember thinking like, I mean, I just kind of like, okay. And we lived in a small town, so we would have to go when we went into the city. There was this thing called a Gretsch Super Axe. I don't know if you remember that guitar. It was a Chet Atkins very weird guitar. Rick Springfield used to play it back in the 80s, a very strange choice of a guitar. And there was a Gibson EB3 bass. And he
Yeah.
goes, what do you think? And I'm like, what do I think? I don't know. I can barely play three chords at this point. I'm
Yeah.
like, well, my dad was such an interesting guy that way. Like he was sort of like bizarrely supportive and yet kind of like, you should probably get an education. He's that kind of like a father. But he was kind of jazzed by this whole like music thing. Long story short, we walked out with the Gibson bass, and that opened up a whole world of like back then no one wanted to play bass. So everybody at school was like, this guy has a Gibson. It was like because the word Gibson meant a lot.
It
Everybody
does.
else had like whatever cheap guitars there were.
A court.
And yeah, exactly Hondo,
Yeah.
whatever they could get their hands on. And I was a kid playing with guys that were already out of high school. The drummer was still in 12th grade, but the other guys were out of high school. So I ended up playing bass in a cover band that would play weekends, high school dances, small pubs, that kind of thing. And I was always in the kitchen because I wasn't allowed to be in the bar. So they would kind of have like you got to sit back here between sets. And I could literally see my friends out there having a good time in the bar. And I'd be like, I remember sitting by giant, like kind of metal drums of ketchup and stuff, just kind of sitting there drinking a soda. And yeah, but that really again opened up a whole other world right there too.
Cool, man. So that's really cool that your dad was supportive and the whole Gibson EB bass, you know, it
He
is
didn't know he
sort of
didn't
I
know what he
grew
was
up.
doing.
Nobody wanted to play bass.
Yeah,
Everybody wanted the guitar, everybody wanted to be drums, and then you had a slew of people just that thought they could sing. They all wanted to be the
yeah.
singer, and no one.
Everybody wanted to be like a David Lee Roth or something like that.
Yeah,
There's that one friend of yours is a real showboat. When he was like last year, he was riding his BMX bike, and this year
yeah,
he's David Lee Roth. You're like, oh, he couldn't really sing, but he had that kind of like,
yeah,
he had that kind of energy. Yeah.
yeah.
But
And
everybody wanted to be Eddie Van Halen or Tommy Lee or whatever, like whatever the version of those guys are. Yeah.
yeah. Was there anyone like once you started playing with Age of Electric, you were the front man guitar player. Do you consider yourself more of one or the other or a bass player?
Well, it's always been like that's the funniest thing because there are people who know me in my life as that or that or that. So people will say it's weird seeing you play bass, and then somebody will say it's weird seeing you just play guitar and sing, and I'll go, you don't know the whole story of how this all went on because when I started playing with my little brother took up the bass, and it was just sort of decided that okay, well then I'll just play rhythm guitar and sing. I had always been a singer in the bands prior to that. I was sort of, by that game of who's the least worst singer that high school kids play. I kind of became the singer of the band, and I was the bass player singer guy. But anyway, so when John and my brother started playing together, I just said, okay, cool, I'll just move over here and play rhythm guitar and sing. Because I always played guitar, but I was never really. It's so interesting when I think about it because I have this conversation all the time. Probably something to do with Pete Townsend and Keith Richards and those kind of guys that I was never really interested in. Like, I would look at guys like Eddie Van Halen and go, I'd be like watching a Bruce Lee movie going, wow, that's amazing. And then walking out of the movie theater without even thinking about going to martial arts classes or anything. I was just kind of like, wow, that's amazing. I always walk away.
Yeah.
So Eddie Van Halen or any of the guys that really sort of inspired all that kind of guitar playing, or I suppose even before that, Jimmy Page and all points in between. But I always just liked playing rhythm. I was more Malcolm than Angus. I just liked playing guitar, and I always thought, oh, there's somebody else that could do the heavy lifting. So that was sort of the way I went with it. And people always ask me that. I think there's something about like now I'm back. We're currently in the middle of finishing this Slash record, so it's back into full-time bass mode. Which I was going to show you this because this Adam Clayton bass is hugely featured on the new record because it's not mine. It's our producer Michael Basquette, Elvis's. This thing is a beast, dude. I don't know what magic is going on in this, but I use the hell out of this bass.
Yeah, they're great basses.
I don't like Wolfgang Van Halen. All of us have gone like, dude, what's the deal on this bass? Like we all end up using it on our records. Like because Elvis was like, you got to try that bass, dude. It's amazing. And I go,
Yeah, it is.
I'm always
It have a jazz neck on it. When Adams,
yeah, it's a little bit of a jazz neck. Yeah,
he'll get the P bass, and then Fender will send us jazz necks for him.
Ah, interesting.
That's his thing. Yeah, dude, those basses are monsters.
It's crazy because I like, so many guys say you got to try this, and I go, okay, you hear it all the time. But when I plugged that thing in, I was like, I ended up using it on a giant chunk of the record because I was like, oh man, whatever's going on between this and we use a crazy different mixture of guitar amps and bass amps to make the tone, but it really sort of really magical. And there's another guy, I hate to say it, guys like Adam, is another guy who's completely underrated. He's kind of like that Michael Anthony kind of thing where it's kind of like, well, he happens to play with these huge personalities and he's sort of, but he's been holding down like that end of things and some very classic things. And when you play bass, you're able to understand more of what that person's role is. And sometimes it seems what would be, I guess, for lack of better words, simplistic. But what it's doing is it's really holding everything together. And guys like Adam, he does magical things that go completely unnoticed,
Yeah.
But I think that's sort of the role of the bass player. And that's why when I was a kid, no one played bass because it's sort of, later on when guys like Steve Harris from Iron Maiden showed up, or even Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue, even though Nikki was known as a player per se, his persona of being the bass player, but sort of very visible in a way,
very frontmanish.
Yeah, exactly. And growing up with like guys like Paul McCartney or Sting or Geddy Lee, they were also singers. So to me, it was kind of like I didn't really think too much about it. I just love it. What it does is it creates such a challenge playing bass. Like I always say, I have to split my brain. This is the bass and this is the vocals. I really have to, even with harmonies, like singing with Myles, I'll often sing, I'm doing it right now. I'm singing in harmonies and I'm not thinking about what I'm playing as I'm singing it. Because I'm just doing harmonies, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then we'll sit down to get ready for a tour, and I'll be like, oh damn, now I have to kind of play this while I'm singing that. And guys like Geddy or Sting, I was always marveled by the things that they're playing don't make sense with what they're singing on top of it. And I mean, well, not with Getty. It's a whole other thing. He's playing keyboards and pedals and all
Yeah.
kinds of nonsense. But Sting does a lot of stuff where he's playing. I'm talking mostly the Police here.
Yeah.
Where he would be playing bass lines where I'd be like, I don't know how he's singing and playing this. He's like really, uh, again, I mean, it's hard to call guys like that underrated, but I mean, underrated as a musician that way,
Yeah.
because there's something about the skill of being able to play plus being able to split your brain in half to be able to sing on top of that. Because I know a lot of my friends are like, they have guys who just play guitar. I don't sing backups at all. I go, how do you not sing backups? He goes, oh, I just can't do it. I can't. How can you not? It doesn't make sense to me. But some people just want to focus on the one thing.
Yeah.
That was a long-winded way of saying I don't really consider myself. It's like Brent Fitz always says, our drummer in Slash's band. He plays bass in my band Toque up in Canada. He plays keyboards. He plays drums, obviously. And he also plays guitar. So it's kind of one of those things where we just sort of go, you know what? I think I'm just a musician. I just like, it's like if you hand me something, by the campfire, I'll probably be able to get a song out of it, And I think I've always been sort of like, it wasn't that long ago. I was like probably 10, 15, 20 years ago or something. I was at some thing. Everybody's going to get up and jam. And all these guys, Rick Emmett from Triumph was there. Billy Duffy from The Cult was there. It was like, all these dudes we're going to get up and jam. And everybody's getting the idea of who's going to play what, who's going to do what. And it goes, well, who's playing bass? And I look around and I go, I guess I'm playing bass. It's kind of like, I guess everybody just sort of looked at me like with this vacant look on their face. And I'm like, I just kind of came on to play a few songs, but I ended up having to play bass the whole night because no one, it went back to being in high school where it's like, no one plays bass. No one can even wrap their head around what they're supposed to do. It's like, you just play the root note and move around and kind of find your groove in it, play with the drums and play with the guitar. It is what it is. Yeah.
Speaking of Slash, man, I mean, you got these two huge personalities, Myles and Slash, that everyone I know that's a fan of your band or talks about your band talks about the other three guys. You, Brent, Frank. Like Brent plays everything.
Yeah.
You play guitar, bass. Do you play keyboards? Do you?
I get around, yeah.
Yeah.
I like to, but I don't. I would never consider myself a proficient, but I do. I love to play. I play on recordings all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. The band is a band. It's not Slash. It's not Myles.
Right.
It's a band, and it just works really well. You guys are a great rock band.
Oh, well, thank you.
How does that feel when you personally being on stage with that much? Is it like the guy that surrounds himself with much better players for everyone in the band? Like Slash surrounding himself with all these great players, you surrounding, Brent surrounding, that's because I've always felt like if you're going to play, surround yourself with better guys because you're going to learn. But how do you guys do it? Because you're all surrounded by better guys.
Well, I think it makes you up your game. I mean, we knew right away. I don't think there was a whole lot of, perceived wisdom in putting the lineup together. I think it was literally, we need guys to go out and support this solo album that Slash did in 2010, 15 years ago now, almost, going on 16. But, it was just kind of get some guys to get in and play. And then as we were doing it, it became kind of like, the fact that there were all these harmonies on these songs, especially the solo album and a bunch of the other things. I just became like, I never like to step on people's toes, but I just sort of, went to Myles, you want me to sing all this other stuff? And Myles was like, please, sing all those harmonies and all these kind of different things. And then, that slowly turned into singing a Guns N' Roses song or whatever here and there for myself, and Myles was like always happy to kind of like take a break.
Yeah.
And then Myles Fitz has found playing, like last tour, we had our drum tech come up to play drums and Fitz went down and played keyboards and Slash played pedal steel. And we did Rocket Man because we did a version of Rocket Man for a soundtrack, a Disney film called Stuntman. And it's just, it's just like, and that's another thing too, is watching Slash go from like one of the, the most recognizable guitar players on the planet. And one day we go to Nashville and he just like fell in love with pedal steel. We did the last record with Dave Cobb in Nashville at RCA.
Yeah.
And, he just fell head over heels for the pedal steel guitar, which is like, it's no joke. Like it's like there's pedals and levers. And
yeah, man.
Things going on. It's not the same as playing guitar. And he just kind of like one day decided he's going to, become like proficient at it. And we got a song on the new record. I think he might have done something on his blues record, but we did a song on the new record that'll be out hopefully next year, where he's playing pedal steel, playing solos, doing the whole thing on it. He's suddenly like legit, and and Myles, is a very underrated guitar player. Like, people don't really realize how crazy talented he is. But funny, the secret guy is Frank Sidoris, who's so talented and sort of finds himself playing behind Slash and behind Wolfgang Van Halen and people like that. But he is a monster player in his own right. And someday we'll be able to show that in whichever light he finds to do so,
Yeah.
It's like I said, you surround yourself. I mean, if you're putting a band together, you're very lucky if you get to surround yourself with guys who make you kind of up your game, because it's like that band Toque, the band Toque that I do with Brent Fitz and I. Corey, the guitar player from Kelly Clarkson and Shania Twain, I've known since we were kids, but he's one of the most talented people I know. So going into it, it's kind of like, you got to make sure your tie's on straight. You're going, you're going to go in and like do your best, as opposed to going, phone this one in. It's like, I'm not that kind of guy anyway. I don't really phone things in because I just love it so much. And, but it's just one of those things where you surround yourself with great players. It makes you play better. I hope.
Yeah. And also I've met all of you guys separately, and I always, I met Brent in Vegas. He came to a Duran show, and I told him, like, man, I really like you guys. I really love your band, and you're also, what's the word I'm looking for? Humble about it.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
You don't rock star it,
No.
So I think that those five personalities. If I met Frank in Oklahoma and I asked him about his guitars, and you get him talking about guitars and he just keeps going.
Oh yeah, off he goes. Yeah,
I love it. He's the reason I'm playing P90s now. Let's just put it that
nice yeah. No, he's like I say, he's an underrated player, an amazing dude. Like, when we first got him, he was 23 years old, and I remember we knew him from Vegas, and Fitz was like, we were looking for a guitar player. He goes, what about Frank? And I go, Frank, that kid? It wasn't like he's a great player and everything like that, and he looked great, and he's a great dude. But I just kind of thought, how does that work? Like, taking in the guy that much younger and putting him with us.
Yeah.
I kind of thought, like, that just seemed kind of odd. And it wasn't that I was against it. It was more a case of just being kind of, just kind of like, it just didn't add up to 2 + 2 = 4 right away, until, of course, we did it. And then now I just can't imagine doing it without him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of people know how the Slash gig came about, how you guys kind of came together. Were you friends with Slash before that? Were you acquainted with him?
No. I'd met him back in like 91. I was in LA. My band was there trying to do the thing and trying to get signed and all that kind of stuff. And we hung out at the Rainbow, as you do.
Yeah.
But he has no recollection of that. I told him once, I go, we hung out together at the Rainbow. And he goes, was I nice? And I go, you were fucking awesome. I mean, he was like, Dean Martin with the drink, and like, hey, he was kind of like very, fun and easygoing, but he was drinking back then. And he's been sober since I've been playing with him for the past 15 years. So so I didn't know him, but I, was obviously, Appetite was a really huge deal for me. Like, it honestly was when we always talk about Nevermind, Smells Like Teen Spirit coming in and just sort of all changing everything.
Yeah.
I think there's another chapter of that Appetite did a very similar thing. It really changed a lot of things. It really changed, you kind of forget how fancy everything was before Guns N' Roses came along.
Exactly, man. Exactly. It's my Deserted Island album.
100%. Yeah. And I'm one of those guys that I could, they always ask me like, hey, you want to sing You're Crazy Tonight or Out to Get Me or Night Train? And I go, sure. And there's no sort of like, give me a minute, I go, no, I know those songs. I could play rhythm guitar to those songs. I could play lead guitar to some of them. I could play bass, drums, whatever. I could sing them. Let's go. Let's play every single song on that record. And it's just one of those picture perfect records. So in meeting Slash, and obviously being very well versed in Use Your Illusion both Use Your Illusion records, you know, and all the Velvet Revolver stuff and all the things that Slash has done. Even reading his book, I reviewed
Yeah.
his book for. I used to review books for this publication in Vancouver back in the day. So you know, it was like it's funny because he's such a fixture in a way, like with the look and everything, that it just sort of like, you know, it's like fucking Mickey Mouse. You know, it's like it's just this hugely recognizable silhouette that you're like, that's the guy. But you get to know the guy who's the guy, and
Yeah.
he's like one of my favorite people. Like we even when we're not together for like, you know, a year doing other stuff, he and I will be sending things back and forth about this movie or that movie, and we're both kind of movie buffs. He's more horror, but we sort of have a Venn diagram of very similar
Yeah.
area. But he loves slasher type stuff, and I love slasher stuff. I like good slasher stuff. I think there's too much, you know. There's
Gore.
a whole other, yeah, you know, just gore for gore's sake is always kind of
Yeah.
like, oh, okay. But I think great horror. I love great horror. You know, sci-fi, all that kind of stuff. We just love. He's also really like, you know, he has his own production company when it comes to films and all that kind of stuff. So we share a lot of very similar interests that way, including music and all kinds of points in between. But you know, he's just a good dude. You know, I mean, all the guys in the Conspirators. I mean, I'm hanging out with Myles now. Just Myles and I are here singing together. So Slash comes in pretty soon, and Fitz soon after that. Frank is out with Wolfgang doing, geez, Creed. I think they're on the road with. I don't even
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. They're the support act.
Yeah, yeah. So it's you know, it's interesting because, you know, we all, especially ever since Guns N' Roses, when Slash returned to that in 2016, it kind of, I I've always said, like, at the end of every cycle, I wasn't sure if that was it. Like, high five, good game, you
Yeah.
know, and never see each other again, or at least never play together again. But it's 15 years later, and we're still making a new record, and it's kind of like, wow, it's so crazy how time just keeps cranking on, and somehow still finding our way back to each other. But you know, our relationships is like funny because on the last one we did last year, we were in like somewhere in South America, and Myles and I were in a van together driving from, you know, the gig to the hotel or whatever was happening, and we were talking about, like, you know, doing this current record, and like, and trying to figure out how's that going to work with, you know, he's there and I'm there and you're there, and we were just kind of like, oh, it just always seems to work itself out. And I remember Myles saying, paraphrasing something like, you know, I'll bet you we'll be having this conversation in 10 years from now. And I remember thinking like, that's absurd, but 100% possible, because it's like, if you would have told me 15 years ago that we'd be doing this, I'd be like, that's not a thing. You know, when I first started playing with Slash, we were just supporting his solo album. I thought it was just going to be like,
One
you know,
and done.
fly outs, go out and do the,
Yeah.
you know, do some appearances and a couple supporting runs, and then just be like done. But we did it for 18 months, and then made another record, went out for another 18 months, and then did another one. And, you know, and Myles was somehow juggling Alter Bridge and all that at the same time, until Guns N' Roses, where we sort of took a more extended break. And even then I was like, I guess that's it, you know. And no, sure enough, it's like, hey, what are you doing? And you're like, chilling, what's up? You know, and the next thing you know, you're back at it.
Yeah. I met Myles years ago. I think Mayfield 4 was supporting Van Halen
Oh, wow.
on the Sammy reunion. I'm almost positive.
Huh.
They were playing in Dallas, and I was working as a local hand. And they had all of them in this tiny room. If you've ever been to the American Airlines Center, which you have, I saw you guys open for Aerosmith.
Yeah, yeah.
The loading dock, there's this small room by the vending machines, and it's tiny, and they had them all in there.
Wow.
But they were just hanging out. But yeah, they're such a great band.
Yeah, I mean, Myles, I mean, I've known Myles since back then for sure, because he used to tour across Canada doing, or not, well, yeah, he did tour across Canada, but with, geez, some Canadian bands that we knew. And I was like, who's this Mayfield for? And everybody was like, dude, this singer's crazy. And in listening to him, I was very blown away. So it was that weird equation where later on it was like, oh, Alter Bridge is those guys, and that's that dude from, you know, it was probably a year into Alter Bridge before I realized, oh, that's the dude from that
Yeah.
Mayfield 4 band. Okay, that's why that guy's so damn good. Yeah,
Yeah. And he is.
he
Man,
really is.
You do so much stuff, keeping yourself busy. How do you how do you enjoy your off time? You don't have much, but how do you enjoy it?
I'm actually my wife and I are what we call indoorsy.
Hmm.
Like we're not really that interested. We are definitely city folk for a guy who grew up in a small town. I'm not really interested in let's go camping. I'm like, what? No, dude, no. But we love, what we love the, like New York City or London or Milan or Paris. We like going places like that. But largely, when I'm my downtime, it's funny that you say that because usually my downtime means I'm preparing for whatever the next thing is.
Yeah.
It's usually like, okay, I have some downtime, but I'm getting ready for this next thing I have to do. Got to brush up on that, or I'm writing songs for this next project, or I'm working on something for the next thing, or whatever. Um, but generally, downtime, it's the craziest thing is we rescue cats. That's a whole thing. My wife and I rescue cats, and there's a whole epidemic of like 30,000 feral cats in Las Vegas. So it's, you can only do what you can do.
Yeah.
And it's not like I'm going to wake up tomorrow and be like, we saved 29,000 of them. It's like, it's like you just do your best. But, my wife's amazing at like placing them, and she's, current always has something going on. And we have a house full ourselves because what we call, foster failures that came into our house and just never left. Yeah. And so that's kind of a big passion of ours. The days of like, let's go out and I live in Las Vegas, but the days of taking advantage of the kind of things that Vegas has to offer are sort of limited to the restaurants and shows and the things like
Yeah.
that. I'm not those years of like we're staying out all night. And, those years are long behind me. But it's funny because when people sort of the idea of what would you do with your free time, it's like I love music so much that I find that that's kind of what I do with my free time.
Yeah.
It's kind
Yeah.
of like the idea of like preparing for the next chapter, whether it's recording or some gigs or just whatever is sort of like we're gonna, could you do a vocal for this? You want to help co-write this thing I'm working on? That kind of stuff to me is fun, and it is part of what I enjoy. And I don't have like a whole lot of other interests in a way, as much as I love movies and I love TV and I love comics and all that kind of stuff. It's sort of like music has always been, number one since as far back as I can remember. So it's sort of like the idea of getting together and creating music, whether it's just together in a room making music or recording it or getting out on stage. That's sort of the fun part. So it seems almost kind of mildly sociopathic to be like, don't you take a break? My wife forced me to go to Kauai one year, like for my birthday. She was kind of like, let's just go and take a vacation, and you're like, what the hell are we supposed to do? I'd never actually really kind of gone anywhere and just sort of sat and
Yeah.
done nothing for a while. And it was actually amazing. I was kind of like, we should do this more, and I think I understand the idea of the kind of rebooting of your whole self, because you have to kind of get away from the insanity once in a while to make yourself appreciated.
Yeah. Um, I told you I ran into you. Well, I didn't run into you. I saw you at the movie theater in Vegas.
Yeah, what movie was it?
Uh,
Well, I guess it was, who knows what movie you were seeing, what movie I was seeing.
no, you were sitting right behind us, a few rows
Oh,
behind.
okay.
And when I was walking in, I saw you. I was with a couple of guys, uh, Killers of the Flower Moon.
Oh, a classic. Martin
And
Scorsese, yeah.
I always try and carry like a couple of shirts of the podcast. And if I see somebody, I give it to them. Uh,
Ah,
and I told the guys, I was like, I'm going to run out to the car. When we walk out, I'm going to run out to the car and bring the shirt back. And they were like, man, he just sat through a 3 hour movie. Do
oh,
you
dude, I would have been thrilled. I mean, people always kind of assume that people are like, well, I mean, the conspirators guys are all sort of like casual, easygoing guys.
Yeah.
So if I, especially if we'd made the connection, I'd be like, oh my God, yeah, totally. That'd be great. But yeah, it's, I mean, life is a small town. Music is a small town. Like it's
Yeah.
kind of like when the connections are like, I know so and so and so. So it's like, oh wow, cool. And it goes so fast, this crazy life, that it's good
Yeah.
to make connections with people. And I would have been absolutely, would have loved to have been able to say hi. But
Yeah.
I know what that's like when you see. I'm the kind of guy, because I'm Canadian, that I've passed up so many opportunities. Kind of regret so many times where it's like, why didn't I say something to Doug from King's X?
Yeah.
I would see him at shows, and I'm such a fan, but I'm kind of like, we've all had those experiences, whether it's like a Gene Simmons type, where you don't know which Gene you're going to get, so you don't really want to approach, because I've had many good things with Gene and Paul, but
Yeah.
they'd have reputations of being, well, he might say hello, or he might tell me to get lost, so.
Yeah.
But I'm not that way. I generally am pretty thrilled when someone comes up, oh wow, well thank you. It's like, or whatever, or just kind of saying hi. It's like,
Yeah.
we're not psychopaths. We should be able to say hello to each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've met all five of the band members, and you guys are all, including Slash, and you kind of walk away disappointed, going, "He was nice.
Yeah, I
Slash
know.
was nice. He wasn't a rock star."
Trust me, we were sitting backstage one time before a show, and there was like we're just sitting there, like kind of watching a Bigfoot documentary on the TV that was on, and I just thought to myself, how disappointed would anybody be if they came backstage to hang out with the rock band? We're all just sitting there like, Bigfoot is present in the northern, and I'm just like, we're just like all kind of like, like not riveted by it, but just sort of, it just happened to be on, and we were just all chilling. I was like, but I think that people's perception of what's actually happening, better than anybody. It's like, it's like,
Yeah.
it's a bunch of guys just chilling, conserving energy to go out and
Exactly.
play
Exactly.
for
I
2
dig it
hours.
though, man. I dig it when you meet, somebody you admire and they're just normal. And
Yeah,
yeah. Um,
totally.
I got to ask you this because I'm a huge wrestling fan, but you had a cover band called Cover Boy with Chris Jericho and
Right.
Brent,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? How did you know Chris before that?
We know Chris from Winnipeg. He's him and Fitz kind of grew up around each other in Winnipeg. So I've known Chris a long time. He's we're on a couple of different chat threads that are
Yeah.
perpetually talking about this and that. I mean, he's Canadian. He loves rock and roll. He loves Kiss, and so we have so many things in common. There's all these things that we kind of go back and forth on. My own interest in wrestling, sort of, like anybody, it's sort of, there was there was the hot streak, and then it sort of ends at a certain point, or it just becomes less passionate.
Yeah.
Because I was such a like Bret the Hitman Hart kind of guy, and that kind of stuff, that we grew up around a thing called Stampede Wrestling out of
Yeah.
Calgary.
Yeah.
And that kind of grew into a lot of those guys went on to the WWF, WWE now. And knowing Chris as sort of the local guy who went on to be, in that world, was like, wow, what a trip, But it wasn't that unusual though, because there were so many Canadian guys that came from that whole
Yeah.
neck of the woods where we grew up, that went on to be wrestlers. It was sort of like,
Edge,
wasn't,
Edge,
yeah, exactly.
Adam Copeland, Edge, all the hearts.
Totally. Yeah. All the hearts, of course. Yeah.
I could totally turn this interview around into me just talking about wrestling.
Yeah, I know. I would be kind of disappointing in that realm, because my little brother was more the target audience by the time, when the WWF really exploded.
Yeah.
He had all the toys and the ring and, everybody, and it was like, and I was into it, but I was so much more into music
Yeah.
that and there was always that crossover, we always knew that the rock stars and wrestling stars had sort of a weird correlation of the similar spaces held. But no, I really, Chris is, he's a very dear friend, and a great supporter of music and what we do. We did a run where Fozzy, his band, opened for us with Slash. So he rode the bus with us. We'd ride each other's buses and hang out, and we'd known each other for a long time. So yeah, So the cover thing we did together was Cover Boy. It was a thing that he and Fitz used to do, where they would just kind of they would just play cover songs. That kind of grew into becoming Toque, because we started as a Fitz's idea of like we were doing charity shows, and they just said, could you put a band together with some some name dudes or whatever, and do like and just play covers or whatever. And Fitz kind of had the idea of like, what if we just did Canadian classic rock? April Wine, Loverboy, Rush, Triumph, whatever. And I go, fuck yeah, that'd be
Tell
awesome.
me you did a Chilliwack song.
Chilliwack, exactly. Yeah, yeah, hell yeah. Yeah, we still do a Chilliwack song. You have to now. It's sort of like all that stuff became kind of the sort of basis that we sort of created for Toque. And Toque goes out next weekend. I got to fly up to Vancouver for a one-off. So it's kind of one of those things where it started as just kind of like a fun thing.
Yeah.
And like I said, the Cover Boy was doing that as well. But for, what's his name? Chris is such a, he's a renowned wrestler, an author, and all points in between, an actor and all that kind of stuff. So Fitz and I just sort of, we started doing our own thing, and it kind of turned into Toque. And now every summer and every winter, we go up and do a run across the country. We've released a number of songs and started writing our own music, and it's done really well in Canada. So we're trying to get more of an imprint elsewhere beyond the Great White North, as it were.
Right on, man. Right on.
Yeah.
How'd you get your nickname?
Todd Dammit rhymes with God damn it. It's that simple.
That's simple.
Yeah. It's like, for whatever reason, as soon as you put the Kerns on the end of it, it gets confusing. If it was just Todd Dammit, I think everybody would go, ha ha ha.
Yeah.
But it was, it's just like one of those old, well, it was sort of the intention of a punk rock kind of John Lydon became Johnny Rotten, or, just the idea was to take your name and stick something at the end of it. So my friends just started calling me that as a kid, as a joke. But there was also Toddzilla, all those kind of things just sort of, hung around. When I first came down to Vegas, it was kind of like interesting because I sort of found myself in Vegas in a very weird sort of, Age of Electric had done really well in Canada. We'd done gold. And then, within the process of downloading and all those things that kind of happened, it became very difficult to, the band broke up, the record company, the whole record business was kind of in a little bit of a schism. And I think it still kind of is, but it's sort of finding the new way is the new way. You know what I mean? But we hadn't found it back then. So I came down to Vegas to work with some friends on a couple different things. And the next thing I knew, I was, just playing around Vegas doing stuff. And the coolest thing was being just some guy named Todd. It was like, no one knew who the hell I was. I didn't have that sort of like, oh, that's so-and-so from such and such. It's like, the Age of Electric had no imprint beyond, the border to Canada. After that, it was kind of like I was on my own. So I just started calling myself Todd Dammit as a gag on stage. And then Vinnie Paul used to come see us all the time from Pantera and all that. And he just loved it. He would scream my name across casinos, and I'd be like, oh, Vinny's here. Todd Dammit, he would say. And in fact, they would go, Todd Kerns was just here last night. You didn't know who the hell you were talking. Who? Todd Dammit. Oh yeah. That's when it really kind of started to stick. And then of course Slash started calling me that, so it became kind of like, okay, well, other than that, I'm just sort of, I don't really consider it a stage name, but it just became kind of it just became kind of part of the thing. Yeah.
And that scene in Vegas, man, a lot of people don't know and I'm talking about a music scene, but a scene of just musicians that get together, hang out, go support each other. I think Sebastian Bach just moved there.
Yeah.
I mean, the great Jake E. Lee lives there.
Dude, I used to see Jake at a guitar shop. I would just walk in there and I'd be like, this is like 20 years ago. I'd walk into the shop and I go, man, there's a guy that plays, it's just shreds in the back of that guitar shop. He's like amazing, and he looks like Jake E. Lee. And then somebody goes, dude, that is Jake E. Lee. I go, because at that point he was in complete like exile. Whatever happened to Jake E. Lee? And I go, what? That's Jake E. Lee? But yeah, it's one of those towns where even like over the years since I've been there, I've watched sort of people kind of come out from LA, and more it becomes, this guy from that and that guy from this, and it sort of creates a scene. Sebastian and I made a record here, actually. His last record, I played bass on the whole thing here in Florida, and so he's a good friend now too, and he's Canadian too. So there's that whole thing. But yeah, no, Sebastian's in Vegas. There's a lot of us out there. It's Phil Lewis from LA Guns is in Vegas, although I don't see him very much. He's sort of a lot more low key. But yeah, it's always had like in the time since I came there, it definitely grew to become more of its own scene that way. Yeah, like a rock
Geezer
scene.
Butler is there in Vegas.
Geezer Butler's there. I know. I still have not seen Geezer. Eddie Trunk lives in Vegas.
I saw him at a U2 show. He goes to all the Sphere shows, Geezer, but he came to one of the U2 shows, and he was walking in the back, and I just kind of gazed at him in my dreams.
Of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I saw. There was one year that they were supposed to do a Sabbath tour. This has got to be, I don't know, quite a while ago now, but they were supposed to do a Sabbath tour, but Tony was sick, so they ended up doing a run called Ozzy and Friends.
Yeah.
So it was basically like they had Zach,
Hello, Slash.
Yeah, Slash. Well, we were on the road doing that, so Slash would pop in. We'd be at like some festival, and then we'd go over to that stage and play with Ozzy. And I remember standing there, like stage right, and I'd be like, that's Geezer Butler right there. I'd be like, because I mean, you forget how important. I mean, Sabbath is another one of those bands that when you really boil it down, because there was so much transition in that band into the later years with Ronnie James Dio and then beyond. But when you really boil it down to the original four guys, you realize how important those four guys were. I mean, like to the whole thing. I mean, and as soon as you start removing one of them, it becomes like it's something different. Including guys like Bill. It's like Bill was the first to kind of. Well, no, I guess Ozzy was the first to really, because the Ronnie, because I'm a huge fan of those two, like Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, those records with Ronnie, but it's a totally different animal. They're a totally different thing.
Yeah.
But you kind of go back and you look at those things and you realize how revolutionary. And of course now, like, there's a lot of that going on since Ozzy passed, and that last show he did, where everybody goes back and looks at Sabbath and goes, I mean, it's mind-boggling what they accomplished. But Geezer, it's interesting because people will ask him, "What did you use on that record? What did you use on that?" And he's like, "I don't really remember." It's kind of like, he's kind of like they were inventing the wheel in real time. Like, I don't know, I had an amp and I kind of just cranked it up and I just kind of. So I think that it's interesting watching guys who were sort of there in the beginning, sort of like before there was sort of, you need these kind of strings and this kind of amp. He's sort of like, I just tried stuff and he sort of found his own style and all that kind of stuff. So, and I think that still goes on today. Like we were just saying, like guys like John Taylor is still tone chasing all these years later, or guys like Slash.
Yeah.
The fact that Slash went from Marshall to Magnatone in the past few years is bizarre. Like, I'm like, what?
That was a big deal.
Massive deal. And I think that, being as close to it as I am, I'm kind of like, to see because guitar players especially are perpetually chasing tone and going like, oh, dude, this is the new thing. And you go, okay. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's funny. I'll go back to something you said about the whole Ozzy Dio, and I am such a. It's like when I was growing up, like you said, it was a melting pot, but there were the Rush guys, and there were the Zeppelin guys, and then there were two Sabbath guys, and I was one of them. And I am such a purebred of Sabbath. Before they were cool, and I have literally gotten into arguments and quit talking to people when they start saying Dio is much better and Glenn Hughes is much. I mean, Glenn, what's his name? The Tony Martin. I'm sorry, Tony Martin Sabbath.
Tony, yeah.
And I'm like, without Ozzy, none of it will be possible.
I think that's.
But I'm like you. I love Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules. Great album that happened to be under the banner of Black Sabbath. The Tony Martin stuff is really cool.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
But yeah. And like you
but
said,
it ain't those first records. It's the same conversation about records, it's the same conversation about David Lee Roth. It's like I go, yes, they arguably Van Halen was much more successful with was not much more successful, but they did really great business with Sammy. And they wrote some classics, but for me, it's always about, and I think I'm sort of a weird purist that way. Like the first version of something that I enjoy, sort of like, it's like my first Sabbath album was Masters of Reality. That's my favorite album. My first Van Halen album is Women and Children First. That's my favorite Van Halen album. It's just sort of like the first one that I heard, because it wasn't like I just heard it and went like, that's great. I was immersed in that record because I didn't have like enough money to go like, now I'm going to go buy Sabbath. Yeah, I'm going to go buy Sabbath tomorrow and Volume 4. It's like, no, I got Masters of Reality. I just like you just burned it out until you saved up enough, money to go get the next one or whatever, or borrow something from somebody else. But it's like, so to me, it's like those four guys, that equation that made that magic. It's like, it's sort of reductive to kind of go, well, Ronnie James Dio's a better singer than Ozzy Osbourne. It's kind of like, well, maybe we could get into the technical aspects of that, but it doesn't make it necessarily better. It just makes it different. And the fact that that's such a fleeting moment, those couple records before he goes on to take that exact same formula into Dio, his own band, then it becomes kind of like, well, that's a different conversation entirely. In fact, I feel like the Heaven and Hell Mob Rules feels like a blueprint for what will become Dio at that point, which is awesome as well.
Yeah.
But Sabbath becomes kind of like, well, I mean, it was a total. The fact that Geezer Butler was playing for Ozzy Osbourne during that phase was like, what's going on here? Didn't you just fire Ozzy a couple of years ago and now you're playing his band?
That was a great lineup. Yeah, I got to see that Heaven and they didn't call it Sabbath, but the Heaven and Hell with Vinny.
I did too. It was fantastic. I mean, Vinny's a monster drummer, one of the greatest. Right? Yeah,
he is. He's such a great drummer. Well, buddy, man, thank you so much for doing this.
Anytime.
It's been a pleasure getting to know you a little bit through this, and I hope we cross paths again. I'll have that.
Oh, absolutely. If you ever get to Vegas, look me up, because it'd be lovely to kind of hang. Because I'm like you, I'm always doing something. But if I'm around, it'd be great to actually get coffee or lunch or whatever people do, whatever normal people do, civilians do.
Civilians. Where can people find you and your projects online?
Oh, well, you can always go to toddkerns.com, but mostly like Instagram, Todd Kerns, Twitter, X is Todd Dammit Kerns, I think, that kind of stuff. So I'm around Facebook, Todd Kerns. There's a musician page there. I have a personal page and a musician page, but it's I generally keep a pretty. I'm generally around. I try to be as interactive as possible, but I will admit, as the Slash thing got bigger and bigger, it became harder. I used to be one of those guys that tried to respond to literally everything, to the point that I just felt like it just got so overwhelming. And then, and then life happens, and kids and a house full of cats. That I find it not as easy to kind of maintain that, but that, I'm also kind of a big believer that life on the street is where life really is. Like, it's kind of like online is awesome, but I feel like walking up and saying hello to somebody in the wild is kind of like we should have at a movie theater. It's like, hey, dude, as opposed to like, although I will say, I've made so many connections, as you and I have online and in every other sort of context. So it's, I'm a grown ass man. The online, the social media thing is still a little alien, no matter how much it is the norm now.
Yeah, I get it. Well, our podcast it's called "Is Breakfast Included?" And if it was included, what do you have
for breakfast?
Yeah,
I am the worst. I used to be a big breakfast guy, but now I'm sort of like one of those kind of like just take it and run, like a Starbucks and a muffin. yeah. So it's usually something as like, and then someone will tell you, there's like your day's worth of calories in this muffin. I go, well, I may not eat again. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
So I hate to say it, like if I was given the choice, I'd probably go and get like a nice big plate of French toast. But it always feels like I'm kind of on the go, and I'm usually at an airport or something like that, or God forbid, a gas station getting ready to go somewhere. So it's always black coffee, which everybody kind of, seems to think is crazy, but I love black coffee. And sometimes the greasiest spoon black coffee can be the best for some reason. And some kind of muffin is usually like the way I roll. I mean, it's throw and go. That's my life is throw and go. It feels like
throw and go. That's my favorite. Yeah. Well, brother, thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy, but I do appreciate it. It was good talking to you.
Yeah, you too. You too. Well, let's keep in touch.
Will do.
Small world.
Right on. Todd Kerns. Todd, Dammit. Kerns. That was a lot of fun, man. He's a great guy. He's everything I kind of wanted him to be, because I'm such a fan of their band. And like I said, I've crossed paths with him here and there, and he always seemed like a nice guy, which was confirmed in this interview. You can find out more about Todd at toddkerns.com. You can find him on Instagram at Todd Kerns, or on X, formerly Twitter, Todd Dammit Kerns. Check out what he's doing. They're working on this new Slash album. Go check out his band Toque. If you're up in the Great White North and you see them, check them out. And while you're online, hit up isbreakfast.com. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Rate and review the show at Apple Podcast. And go on over to our YouTube page, subscribe, like, hit that notification button. And while you're there, buy a shirt. Buy some merch, man. I'd like to thank Sheldon Dingwall for connecting us. We need to get Sheldon back on this show, don't we? Yeah, we do. For connecting me and Todd. It was very kind of him to do that. I want to thank Todd for taking the time to talk to us. I'm done. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next week.